Okay, I said we had a strong lineup tonight with some powerful stories. This next story is just as powerful in a very different way. Tragically, I think there's too many Americans that are experiencing what she went through. I really have a lot of esteem for this young lady. She's a mom with young kids. She's going to seminary up in Chicago. She still has time to host her own radio show. Give it up for Elizabeth Valencia. All right.
So I have a drink up here because I'm getting over the flu. So this is just in case I need it. So I'm going to put it over here. Hi. And hola. So my miracle that I'm here to share with you is really that I'm up here in front of all of you, while having two cameras in the room that are recording me, that will permanently record a video to go on YouTube. It's a miracle for me because I have spent most of my life hiding from cameras, hiding from the spotlight, doing everything I could to just not relive the kind of cruelty that I lived growing up. And that was for a couple of reasons. I was bullied relentlessly, and it had a huge impact on my self-esteem. And what your body does when it senses danger is that it retreats, and it goes into a survival mechanism. So my survival mode was to hide. And I mean that very literally. I mean, I would hide in bathrooms at the moment of panic. I would act like I was tying my shoe and untie it to avoid being around people that I was afraid of. And it wasn't just bullying. I'm a first-generation Latina. So I grew up with immigrant fear, which is real and hard to explain to people. So I grew up with social anxiety, body image issues, not diagnosed, but I've gone to counseling and spoke with my counselor about, if it was going to be diagnosed, these are the sorts of things I would have. Generalized anxiety, the kind of anxiety that would keep someone away, and it does keep many away, from being involved in the world. And a lot of shame and fear, and those are really bad mixed together. They literally keep people from living. So a lot has changed, though, in the past couple of years for me. And here I am, still terrified. But now I know that it's not just me. It's like anybody who'd be up on a stage would be a little bit nervous, right? So it's all right. But my miracle of change, which is what I'm here to share, came about through me finally saying to myself, it is time for you to own your place in this world. You have a place in this world. And recognizing that even though I form a small part of it, I am affecting the world around me just as the world around me is affecting me. So with that, I have a very multicultural and multi-faith background, and a lot of painful experiences that have deeply shaped my take on the conversation of miracles. So I grew up in a Spanish-speaking Catholic home, and when we observed miracles, we thought of God's intervention in the world, extraordinary things that are happening, often connected to prophets and saints. Now, I've also been Muslim for 16 years. And in Islam, and this is where I get to use my clicker. In Islam, there are two types of miracles. The first is what's called a mu'jiza. And a mu'jiza is the kind of miracle that we associate to prophets chosen by God, as Abrahamic faith traditions see. Those prophets that rise to their prophetic calling and who are given some sort of grand event to sort of make their message credible, to make them credible, to inspire consciousness growth, on a wider societal level. And then there's what's called a karama. And a karama is an individual-oriented, lower-key type miracle, something awe-inspiring, shifting, but accessible to all of you and to me. So I've dipped my feet in Sufism, which is the mystical side of Islam, and in Buddhism. And all of my traditions have been amazing tools for me to be able to align my heart, my mind, and my body and work and heal from a lot of the stuff that I've gone through. I grew up believing in miracles and hoping for them and praying for them in any way that my traditions would allow me and encourage me to. But I spent a lot of time frustrated that nothing seemed to happen. So this has been me most of my life. Praying and waiting for change, waiting for my life just to change. So during my time in my Sufi path, my spiritual teacher said something. He said that the greatest miracle is when we awaken to ourselves. So some part of ourselves that needs changing, needs empowerment, needs rebuilding, whatever that is, and that is what lasts forever. And then I remember during my time as a Sufi as well, there was a quote from a Sufi mystic from the past, and I paraphrase, that when we pray for something, it's God already wanting to gift us what we're seeking. So in essence, it's like half the answer already. So interesting take for someone that has spent her life looking like that. But so I've spent a lot of time praying for all sorts of things that to me seem so, extraordinary because it wasn't my reality. Transformation, makeover, to fit in, to be liked, to be prettier, to be funny, thinner, to be courageous, to live my authentic life. And it's been really hard, but I see that I missed two things. One, praying for a miracle needs to have action as part of the work. Two, just because I didn't have what I wanted, the things that I thought were going to launch me to be ready, to keep going forward in my life, didn't mean that change wasn't happening around me and through me. It was. So I grew up, first generation Latina, as I've shared, and caught in two worlds. Caught in the world where Spanish is spoken at home and English in school and no access to cultural translators. I grew up as part of a system that does make life harder for people of color, for immigrants, for LGBTQ identifying folk, for religious minorities. And I know because I've lived through it, even though I look lighter skinned. I grew up with a lot of fear to stand out. My parents told me, be careful when you're out there, don't bring attention to yourself. And when the bullying began for me in elementary school and I began to get ridiculed and excluded, I had a whole new set of fear just erupt. I was called all sorts of names. I was bullied for everything, and it made no sense to me. I was bullied for the light skin that I have as a Mexican, bullied for the freckles that dot my face, bullied for the old yellow Datsun that my dad used to drop me off at the bus stop with, bullied for my quiet nature. And then it got worse as I went through puberty. And it became attacks over my body. And I was called names like fat ass, often enough, ugly, often enough, and the expression, ew, came at me from random places, which I know took a huge toll and was part of the reason why I couldn't actually stand in close proximity to people, because of the constant fear that somebody might actually say something, find something on me that they could then use against me. So all of these things made it very easy for me to live in a cycle of fear and avoidance of my own life. And I grew up very passionate and excited to be singing and to be involved in all sorts of things. This was me. I was also not given a seat on the bus when the bus driver would take off. And that was really hard and really scary. And I was bullied at home too. So you can imagine that little girl and no access to cultural translators. But something amazing happened a couple of years ago when I began to say to myself, you know what, enough. And now I'm going to start, living out the other half of what I've been praying for. And so I started going to spoken word events, nervous, in my headscarf with my kids there next to me for safety, because I was like, everybody loves kids. And I mean it. And started to read things and record them with my phone, and I started to launch myself into leadership opportunities. I'm like, I need to conquer my social anxiety, counseling, and it's been a non-linear path that I can't actually put into words here to tell you everything I've done to be able to be on this stage today. In the meantime, I've created a new life for myself. I have sang in a mariachi. Those are the sorts of things that were the first to go when I became scared. I stopped singing, expressing myself. I didn't talk very much. I am going to school in Chicago, where I now consider it like my second home, even though I'm not there very often. And this was in August. And I just felt like I owned Chicago, and it was a beautiful feeling. The picture with Krista Tippett, she is my role model, because when I started to own my place in the world, I realized I have these deep passions connected to listening to people, to being present with people, very deeply connected to those wounds that I've carried my whole life. And I went to this conference, and there she was. And I followed her, I sat with her for 45 minutes, I cried, I shared with her my story. And she told me, contact me anytime, because I was trying to launch myself as a radio show host for an online thing. It was fantastic, unbelievable. And then over here, I got to give my first talk at the State House, urging people to pay attention in today's time. Today, as a result, I also get to witness my children. And I get to empower them, because I don't want them to live the kind of life that I went through. I went through too much, they don't have to, right? Lesson learned. So my youngest one, I heard the guitar interest, and he's in guitar. I get to witness my oldest child be in piano. And a huge miracle is witnessing my 13-year-old now. He got to do a presentation at a conference. He was the youngest kid there, an 8th grader, talking about systemic oppression and gentrification. And he's gotten calls to be on radio programs, to get to open and share his voice. And he's half Mexican, part Palestinian. His voice needs to be heard in today's time. And finally, so during this whole process, this non-linear journey, I've also made an affirmation that one day I would give a TED Talk. And I was like, I don't know if it'll ever be, because I've been so terrified, deeply, deeply terrified of being on stage and being recorded and being vulnerable like that. So I sat with Richard Brendan, because I met him through my congregation, to get advice from him, on radio. Like, can you help me? Can you tell me? Because I'm getting ready to interview Ann Watts, which is Alan Watts, his daughter. And I'm like, can you help me? So we sit down for coffee and all of that. Going back to the beginning, where I shared that my thing is to hide, and really my miracle is to be here on stage in front of you. I wasn't surprised that while I was sitting next to Richard, I said, I would love to help you with walk the talk behind the scenes. So he said, first come to one. So I came to love in action. And I was so inspired, and I was like, I'm never gonna be in the backstage. I'm just not gonna come again because I don't wanna be up there on stage. And when the Miracles one showed up, I was so called. It was like this feeling, I followed it. I'm a Gemini, that's what we do. And so here I am. And so if I were to give you a takeaway, okay, especially now that I've gone over my time, if I were to give you a takeaway is find your place in the world. Because there's a place for you, especially today where we need more action. I'm surprised that the place that hosted my wounds actually became the place where I feel most called and most pulled to work with those people, to work with our youth who are being bullied, who are going through social anxiety, to work with our Latino community. So find your place because you really are a part of that change, whether you like it or not. It's happening around you. So thank you. Thank you for being a lovely audience and for being here tonight. God bless you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm so proud of you.
Thank
How do you
you.
feel?
I feel amazing.
Okay,
I feel
yeah.
amazing.
And you're not behind the scenes, are you?
No, I'm not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Richard.
Yeah. It's over here.